The day had been August hot, but by dusk Maple Street cooled enough to let the trees sigh. I was sitting on my front stoop, balancing a stack of ungraded freshman essays on my knee while my daughter, Lily, hunted sidewalk chalk in the grass. Somewhere behind us, a television laughed too loud, and I was deciding whether to start another reading marathon or call it a night when a faint metallic clatter echoed across the road. Mrs. Carver's porch light, the one that always flickered, like a nervous eyelid, had given up entirely. I watched her shake the fixture with one hand while shielding her eyes with the other. Chin tipped in frustration, auburn hair swept into a hurried knot. The lamp remained stubbornly dark. Before I thought twice, I set the papers aside and called over to Lily that I'd be back in 2 minutes. My father's dented toolbox sat by the door like a loyal dog. I grabbed it and crossed the street. "Can I help?" I asked, stopping at the foot of her steps. Elena Carver straightened, exhaling with equal parts relief and reluctance, as if pride battled against practicality. "I hate to impose, Noah. I know you've got your hands full." Her gaze slid to Lily, waving chalk-stained fingers behind me. "Porch lights are my specialty," I joked, hefting the toolbox, "at least after sunset." She laughed softly, a sound that landed somewhere between surprise and gratitude. Up close I noticed the faintest freckling on her cheeks and a smudge of paint on her sleeve, evidence of some solitary project inside. She stepped aside, motioning me toward the wobbling sconce. The job was simple: a loose wire, a stripped screw. But in the few slow minutes it took to pry off the brass cover, I became acutely aware of the hush inside her house. No television drone, no teenage music spilling down a hallway, only the occasional creak of settling lumber. The kind of quiet that feels earned yet unwelcome. "That should do it," I murmured, tightening the last screw. The bulb flared, then settled into a steady amber halo that lit the cedar posts and our faces in warm relief. She folded her arms loosely, watching the glow. "I've been meaning to fix it for weeks, just didn't get to it." I sensed the sentence trailing somewhere more personal. "Newly empty rooms." Perhaps I dusted my hands, happy to cross the street any time. Alina opened the door for me to wash my hands, and I followed her into the foyer. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and sawdust. Moving boxes were pushed against one wall, half-taped, half-opened monuments to transitions she hadn't announced. "I was rearranging," she said quickly, noticing my glance, "making the place feel smaller, in a good way." "It already feels welcoming," I replied, then flushed at how earnest I sounded. In the living room, a vintage turntable sat beneath a single lamp. A record waited on the spindle. Miles Davis kind of blew its jacket propped like art. "You like jazz?" she asked, following my gaze. "My dad raised me on it. Said the best thinking happens between trumpet notes." I chuckled. "I've wanted that album for ages, but every decent copy is out of my budget." Without hesitating, Alina slid the record from its sleeve and handed it to me. The vinyl was mint, the label crisp. "Borrow it as long as you like." I held it as if it might dissolve. "Are you sure?" "It's sat here years waiting for company," she said. Her smile was half shy, half defiant, as though generosity itself felt daring. We talked a little about her son starting college on the coast, about Lily's obsession with prehistoric animals, about how none of my students could spell metaphor. Light conversation, but every sentence carried subtext, small sparks, leaping between pauses. Through the archway I glimpsed a half-painted stair railing, brush left mid-stroke. Her to-do list was long, and solitude had stretched the hours too wide. At the door she offered a formal handshake. I balanced the record under one arm and slid my hand into hers. Her palm was cool from the evening air, her fingers slender yet certain. The greeting meant goodbye, but the silence around it felt like a held breath. For a heartbeat, the porch light hummed overhead, illuminating the slight color that rose in her neck, the sympathetic flutter in my chest. "Thank you again, Noah," she said, voice lowering to something almost confidential. "Anytime," I answered, quietly, meaning more than the wire and the screw. Across the street Lily was chasing fireflies, dots of gold blinking over her head. I released Elena's hand, conscious of the thin night air and whatever line we'd just approached. Back home, Lily fell asleep clutching her stuffed pterosaur, and I lowered the stylus onto kind of blue. Trumpet notes spilled into the dim kitchen. Soft yet insistent, like someone asking a question without words. I rested my fingertips on the spinning edge of the record, then on my own wrist, feeling pulse and rhythm merge. The porch light across Maple Street shone steadily through Elena's front window, a silent beacon, and I wondered whether she was watching her freshly lit entryway, or if she too was listening to the gentle ache of something beginning outside. The street lay hushed between us, no wider than before, yet somehow charged, as though crossing it again might mean stepping into a story neither of us could yet name. It was a Thursday night when Alina called the kind of soft, unhurried evening where the world feels half asleep beneath a drizzle. I'd just tucked Lily into bed, her damp curls fanned out over a dinosaur pillowcase, when my phone buzzed. "Noah, I'm sorry to bother you. I think the kitchen faucet's leaking. It's kind of urgent." Her voice had that mix of polite distance and reluctant need, as if she'd rehearsed asking for help and still didn't believe it was okay to do. I told her I'd be right over. The rain picked up as I crossed the street, toolbox in hand again. Porch lights glowed against the sheen of water pooling in the gutters. I knocked once, and she opened the door in house slippers and a soft gray sweater, sleeves pushed to her elbows. Her hair was pinned loosely, as if she'd meant to fix it earlier but got distracted. "The leak's under the sink," she said, brushing damp hair from her temple. I didn't want to make it worse by poking around. "No problem, let me take a look." I followed her into the kitchen where the overhead lights cast a gentle warmth on everything. The faucet was dripping steadily, a quiet percussion in time with the rain outside. I knelt and opened the cabinet doors, feeling under the pipes for moisture. "It's a small crack," I murmured. "Easy patch job." As I twisted the valve off, she crouched beside me to hand over a towel. That's when her knee brushed my shoulder, just a whisper of contact, but it sent a pulse up my spine like static finding skin. "Sorry," she said quickly, pulling back. "No worries," I replied, though I kept my head down longer than necessary, pretending to focus on the fittings while my pulse recalibrated. Minutes passed with only the rhythmic drum of rain on the window and the occasional clink of my wrench. My shirt caught a splash when I unhooked the damaged section. Alina rushed in with a dry one from the laundry basket, and as she handed it over, our fingers met. This time neither of us apologized. After the faucet was fixed, she insisted I sit for tea. "Chamomile's all I've got," she said, pouring into mismatched mugs. I took mine with thanks, trying not to stare at the chipped rim of hers, the kind of imperfection that hinted at stories. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the teacups warming our hands but not quite the space between us. "Is your daughter asleep?" she asked gently, out cold. "Rain does that too." A small smile lifted one corner of her mouth. "I used to put on thunderstorms on CD for my son when he was little. He said they sounded like safety." "What about now?" I asked. "Now he sleeps in a dorm 3 states away and forgets to call me back." There was no bitterness in her voice, only a note of tired affection. I didn't press further, but she volunteered more anyway. "We signed the divorce papers last month. I haven't sent mine in yet. Not because I want to undo it. I just haven't figured out how to file that version of myself away." I nodded slowly, my hands curled around the warmth of my mug. "I know what you mean. My wife passed 3 years ago. It took me to move her favorite sweater from the back of the closet." Alina looked up sharply, softly. I saw something open in her expression, not pity, recognition. "I didn't know," she said. "I'm sorry. It's okay. We had a good life, even if it was short. Now it's just me and Lily figuring out what after looks like." There was a long silence, but not an uncomfortable one, the kind that lets two people breathe the same air without needing to fill it. Eventually Elena reached across the table, not for my hand, but to right a crooked napkin holder. Still, the motion was close enough that I caught the faint scent of rain in her sleeves and maybe something floral beneath it. "I'm glad you came," she said, "even if it was just for a pipe." "It wasn't just a pipe," I answered, without meaning to sound like anything more. But it landed between us anyway, and we both heard it. The rain had stopped by, with the time I stood to leave. Through the front windows, the driveway shimmered like a lake of glass. I stepped outside, toolbox in one hand, her voice still lingering in the other. "Good night, Noah." "Night, Elena." I turned once on the sidewalk, glancing back. Her silhouette stood just behind the curtains, backlit by the kitchen light, not waving, just watching. And for the first time since Lily learned to speak, I didn't want to walk back to my own house alone. The power went out just past noon on a Saturday, the kind of July day where the sun felt vindictive. Every ceiling fan stopped mid-whirl, and the neighborhood air turned syrup-thick. I was slicing watermelon for Lily when my phone rang. "Do you still have that generator you mentioned? My freezer's gone warm and I've got a week's worth of food in there." I said I'd bring it right over. Lily was napping on the couch in front of a battery-powered fan, so I left her a note and crossed the street again. My third visit in as many weeks. Elena met me at the door, hair damp and clinging to her neck, her blouse sticking to her back in the oppressive heat. She didn't bother with small talk, just led me to the side yard where her freezer sat half defrosted. I figured if I could run an extension cord through the attic window, it might keep things cool until the grid comes back, she said, shielding her eyes. "But I'm not exactly nimble enough to wrestle that beast alone." The attic was narrow and dust-caked, lit only by sunlight leaking through old vents. It smelled like cedar insulation and forgotten years. I climbed first, pulling the generator cord behind me while Alina followed, balancing a flashlight and a pair of candles. As I crawled toward the window, my knee knocked over a box sealed with brittle tape. A small avalanche of sketchbooks tumbled out, their spines curled with age. Alina crouched beside me. "Oh wow, I forgot those even existed." She picked one up, brushing off dust with the sleeve of her wrist. The pages were filled with charcoal sketches, some rough, some impossibly tender. Faces mid-smile, hands cupped mid-prayer, lovers leaning in, never quite kissing. "You drew these?" I asked. She nodded, cheeks flushed from heat or memory or both. "Back in college, I thought I'd be an artist once, but life rerouted me, marriage, baby, bills." Her voice trailed off. "These are incredible," I said, and I meant it. There was emotion in the strokes, something hungry and unfinished. She smiled faintly. They're old ghosts now, maybe, but they still breathe. We sat there in the thick warmth of the attic, flipping through pages, laughing softly at some of the old notes she'd scribbled in the margins. When the sun sank enough to steal even the attic's glow, Alina lit 2 candles and placed them between us on a crate. The flicker cast shadows over her collarbone, made her sketches look alive again. My shirt clung to me. I caught the shimmer of sweat on her throat. "There's something strange about being up here," she murmured, like time forgot this place. I nodded. Maybe time knew we'd need it later. We were quiet again, until I stood to adjust the generator's angle by the window. The beam of her flashlight caught my shoulder and I turned just as the floorboard beneath me groaned. I lost my footing. She lunged forward. I didn't fall far, just enough to tip sideways, and in a flash, I caught her waist to steady myself. She caught my elbow. For a second, we were suspended half-balanced between instinct and something else. Her breath landed against my jaw. I felt her fingers tense on my arm, the press of her stomach against mine, the burn of the heat that wasn't from the air. Neither of us moved. The attic held its breath around us. My hand stayed at her waist longer than it needed to. Her palm didn't let go of me either. And in that small, silent pocket of candlelight and sweat and charcoal ghosts, I thought about what it would feel like to kiss her. But I didn't. We didn't. Elena pulled back slowly, her voice rasping, like it hadn't been used in years. "I think the heat's messing with our heads." "Yeah," I said, even though the truth felt warmer than that. We both laughed, awkward and gentle. She blew out one of the candles and fanned herself with an old envelope. I checked the generator, making sure it was stable, even though I already knew it was fine. We left the attic quietly, the box of sketches staying behind like it had been waiting for that moment and nothing more. On the porch, the air felt lighter but no less charged. We stood there in the glow of dusk, listening to cicadas scream and lawn sprinklers hiss in neighboring yards. "I'm glad you came," she said, echoing the words from a week ago. "So am I replied. But this time my voice carried something I hadn't put in it before. When I walked back to my house, shirt damp and hands still tingling from her waist, I didn't sleep easily. I lay in bed wondering how long 2 people could dance around a line before it erased itself completely. It started with a text, just a photo of a paint swatch, pale green, the color of old hope, and a single line beneath it, "Thinking of redoing the spare room, want to help." I texted back, "Only if I can bring Lily's rainbow roller an hour." Later, I was standing in Elena's upstairs hallway, watching her pull furniture toward the center of the room. The space was quiet and bare, the kind of room that waited too long to mean something again. She handed me a cup of iced tea and a drop cloth, the sleeves of her t-shirt already flecked with primer. "This room used to be his," she said, motioning to the old posters curled at the edges, faded tape still clinging to the corners. "He didn't want to take anything with him, said it was just stuff." I laid the cloth out, unsure how to respond to that. "Sometimes leaving things behind is a way of proving you've left." She smiled, sad and understanding. "And sometimes it just means you expect someone else to deal with it." I didn't ask which one her son had meant. I opened my canvas bag and took out Lily's tiny paint roller, blue handle, rainbow foam. She'd outgrown it last summer when we repainted her bedroom mint green. She'd called it her brave roller. I never asked why. We worked side by side, dipping into the tray, brushing broad strokes across tired walls. Paint fumes gathered like soft fog. We moved mostly in silence, but not the awkward kind. The kind that lets you hear yourself breathe beside someone else and not feel alone doing it. "You're good at this," she said, studying my lines. "You haven't seen the crooked stripes I did in Lily's closet." "Maybe crooked is honest," she said. "Nothing in my life has ever stayed inside the lines." I turned to respond, and just then, she flicked her brush, a quick stripe of green across my cheek. "Or," she said, feigning shock. "Did I do that?" I laughed. Pretty bold for someone with no backup paint. With exaggerated care, I reached into the tray and smeared a light dab along her forearm. She gasped, playful, dramatic. "This means war." And for a moment, we were not a widow and a woman with divorce papers unsent. We were just 2 people in an empty room, laughing like children, hearts thudding louder than any brushstroke. When the laughter faded, we stood close, too close for anything casual. She looked down first, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm scared, Noah," I swallowed. "Of what?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she dipped her brush again and ran a long stroke down the wall, slow, deliberate, of being a rumor, a whisper over fences, of being the older woman next door who couldn't be alone without crossing lines. Her words hit like a cracked window in summer heat, letting in air you didn't know you were missing. "I'm scared too," I said quietly. "Not of the neighbors, of wanting something again, and not knowing how to keep it if I ever got it." We stood still, brushes dripping. I could feel my heartbeat against the handle of mine, as if it had its own rhythm. She looked at me then, not shy, not bold, just open. "Maybe it's not about keeping it. Maybe it's about not pretending we don't feel it." I stepped forward, almost without thinking. Her hand moved as if to meet mine, and we froze in that fragile almost. Then a car door slammed. Outside the sound was sharp, a neighbor returning, the outside world arriving like a slap. We both startled, instinctively stepping back, brushes lowered, cheeks flushed deeper than the paint. Alina turned to the wall, swiping a fast line of green across an unmarked corner. The motion was shaky now. "We should finish the second coat," she said, voice composed. Back turned. I nodded, even though I knew she couldn't see. The room filled again with a scent of paint and restraint. Every drop from the brush to the tray echoed louder than before. When I left that night, my sleeves still smelled faintly of green and lemon soap. I walked home with streaks of paint on my forearms and one across my cheek, a mark I didn't try to wipe off. Lily was asleep in her bed, her rainbow roller leaning in the corner like a tiny memory of something brave, and across the street, Elena's spare bedroom glowed softly through the window, still unfinished, still drying, still holding everything we hadn't said aloud. The night air was cooler than it had been in weeks, but still carried the low hum of a summer too proud to sleep. Crickets droned in the grass, and the sky above Maple Street turned a deep navy. Touched faintly by the amber blush of the street lamps, Alina sat on the porch swing, barefoot, one foot brushing the ground to keep it rocking gently. The scent of fresh paint drifted from the open upstairs window behind her, sweet, sharp, and comforting. I leaned against the railing, arms folded, the sleeve of my shirt still faintly green from the afternoon's unfinished coat. She looked at me for a long time before speaking, not shy anymore, just quiet in the way someone is when the words matter. "I don't think I've breathed this easy in years," she said. "Not even today, with the paint or the music or the laughter. But right now, this. I lowered myself into the swing beside her. The wood creaked under my weight, but she didn't flinch or move away. Her arm remained beside mine, close enough for the warmth to pass between us like current. "You reminded me," she said, "that sometimes lines aren't fences. Sometimes they're invitations. But only if you're brave enough to step over them." I glanced toward my house porch light still on, Lily's bedroom glowing with the soft blue of her nightlight, her dinosaur silhouette cast on the curtain. "She's going to ask questions," I murmured. "She deserves answers." Alina replied, "So do you." I turned back to her, heart thudding, steady and heavy. I didn't think I'd find something again. Not really. Not this kind of quiet, where it feels like nothing needs to be said. She nodded slowly. "Me neither. And if someone else told me it would come from a single crossed street, I'd have laughed." We both smiled at that, a laugh that wasn't from surprise anymore, but recognition. The porch swing kept moving, a lazy, back-and-forth rhythm that made the moment feel endless. I reached for her hand. Not sudden, not impulsive, just slow, certain, like something I'd been rehearsing without knowing it. Her fingers met mine halfway, fitting in a way that felt natural, not cinematic, the kind of rightness that doesn't ask for music to announce it. We sat like that, hands clasped lightly, our elbows brushing, the night alive around us in gentle, ordinary ways. A dog barked 2 houses down. A moth flitted near the porch light Alina had once called useless. "I think I painted that room for her," she said softly, eyes toward the upstairs window, "but also a little for me, for what might come next." "And what might that be?" I asked. She tilted her head toward me. "Breakfast. Questions, the slow stuff. I'm not promising a parade, Noah, just presence, that's all I've wanted," I said. "Someone who stays when the porch light's off, and even when it flickers." She looked at me then, really looked, and I felt the shift happen inside both of us. Not a fire, not a storm, just a deep, quiet settling, like a house finding its foundation after years of creaking. "We tell her tomorrow?" she asked. "Yeah," I said first thing. "Then I hope you'll let her pick the curtain color. I hear rainbow rollers are all the rage." We laughed again, low and real. Then we fell into silence, not out of lack, but fullness. The kind of silence that cradles something new and doesn't rush it to grow. The night stretched around us, wide and forgiving. Porch light above us holding steady, street lamps lining Maple like soft candles on a path we hadn't planned but were ready to walk. And as I sat there beside her, with paint beneath my nails and her fingers wrapped gently in mine, I realized that crossing the street had never really been about tools or repairs. It had been about crossing into a version of life we'd both stopped believing we could live. One that held color again. One that let the past rest. One that made room. And so, I leaned my head back, eyes half closed, hand still in hers, and I whispered the only thing that felt big enough to hold the night. Crossing one street changed 2 homes and every map after.